Hello, friends, atheists, agnostics, Christians, believers, non-believers, whoever would pick up the Solid Faith podcast. We are excited about our next guest, Daniel Ray. Daniel Ray has put together a book. He's edited the book alongside Paul Gould called The Story of the Cosmos. And in that book, he along with several other great contributors, talk about everything from black holes, binary stars, creation from nothing, the beauty of space, art, philosophy, science, history, why we shouldn't really even use the term space to describe the heavens above us. So for anybody out there that has grown up enjoying, going out looking at the stars, if you're captivated by that and you want to understand more about, why that seems like an almost spiritual experience, this is going to be a really unique podcast. This book is a really unique book in and of itself, and it's become one of my new favorites on my bookshelf. So we're thrilled to have Daniel Ray on the Solid Faith podcast. Hope you enjoy it. Well, Daniel, I just finished reading Story of the Cosmos about, a week ago or so, and I've got to say, first off, before we kind of get into this discussion, the book in itself is excellent. Harvest House did an excellent job. The quality, the pages, the pictures, the colors in the book is just rich, and so I enjoyed reading it, and I want to get into, a little more about what the book is, but I just, overall, man, good job well done. It looks really good, and you can tell you guys, just really put a lot of work and effort into it. I've heard a little bit about the backstory. I know you did a podcast on your Good Heavens podcast, just telling the story of how the whole project came together, and I think that one is just excellent. It was just, the way you told the story was great. So for those who can go back and listen to the Good Heavens podcast, I'd really suggest them, to do that and hear the whole story. But if you could just briefly just tell us a little bit about how the project came together, and then we'll get into it.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, Clark. It's really cool to be talking to someone in a program from which I came. And congratulations on almost being done. It's a good program, a lot of opportunities, and you just never know what kind of doors it's going to open up. So the program opened up the opportunity for the book, and it was a collaborative effort between me and Dr. Paul Gould, who I have on the screen there for your listeners. I'm just a sort of a lay person that, after my apologetics degree at HBU, I delved into the world of atheists, and I was on a guest of 5 or 6 different atheist podcasts and just exploring the best arguments that atheism had to offer. It was the first time in my 20-some-odd years of being a Christian with an adult conversion to Christianity to really explore atheism, what was out there. And so, long story short, the book kind of came out of not only the degree, but my engagement with atheists, because a lot of the times in my discussions with them, science and the universe would always come up. So I took the idea, after I graduated, I had an idea to have Dr. Michael Ward, come to Texas and speak about C.S. Lewis, as he always does, but with a little bit of a twist. Through my degree, actually at HBU, I saw a Hubble Space Telescope scientist do a presentation on his work with Hubble. And magically, he stayed in touch with me after I met him after the program. So when I was finished with my degree, I had him and Michael. I asked both him and Michael, if they would be interested in doing a program where Michael talked about C.S. Lewis and his imagination, his cosmological imagination, and Dr. Kokomower talking about his work with Hubble. And so here on the screen, I just got some pictures of the event that we had at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary back in March of last year. And there was, as you can see here, it was well attended. Over 200 people came, and it was what we call the astrophysics and fantasy, Hubble meets Narnia. And so it was a combination of astrophysics for lay people, the science of the telescope broken down, but a lot of pretty pictures of the universe. And then Dr. Ward presenting C.S. Lewis's literary imagination about the heavens. And so it was a fantastic night. And out of that evening came the book event. I mean, there were children and families and dads and moms and grandmas, and people were taking notes. And it went over better than I expected. But my contact there at the seminary was Dr. Paul Gould, and he helped me put it on. And Dr. Gould is he is an author of 4 books, and so he suggested we do a book about this thing. I says, well, I'm just a guy looking for a place to have an event. I don't want to write a book. I don't know anything about book writing. I didn't even know who Paul was. And he's like, well, think about it. And I didn't know he was published. I didn't know anything. So he coaxed me into it, and never read anything that I had ever written. Didn't even know really who I was. But we sat down in his office and wrote a quick proposal one afternoon, got some people together through my contacts, through Michael and Holly at HBU. And pretty soon we had 12, 13 people that were willing to contribute a chapter. And so that was quite a while ago, in May of 20. I don't even remember the dates of how this all came together. But May of 2017, I think it was, when Paul and I wrote the proposal. So it's been over 2 years since this project started, but that's the long story of it. That's how it came about.
Man, that's just a neat. I was just fascinated with the whole story, because to bring Hubble meets Narnia. I mean, that just grabs anyone's attention. It just sounds like two things on the total opposite sides of the world, coming together.
Well, that's what we actually don't think. I actually don't think we were doing something new, something very ancient, because
right.
long before the advent of modern science, where science itself became its own thing, science was considered. It was called natural philosophy, and people that were investigating the creation were conversant in a wide variety of subjects. They knew poetry and Hebrew and Greek, and they knew botany, and they knew all kinds of things. So they weren't specialized. They didn't specialize in one particular thing. They knew a lot of different things. And so this idea that there can be people that can know a lot about different subjects could see how they fit together. And so it seems discordant to the modern ear that you could combine astrophysics and fantasy literature. But it speaks to the idea that science, as we do it today, requires the use of the imagination as well as reason. It's not just a purely rational, reasonable, logical proposition to do science. There's a lot of creativity that goes on in the mind of a scientist when he is proposing ideas and concepts and theories. So it's a very ancient way of looking at the cosmos. How does it all fit together? And so we just took two pieces and fit them together, and it was like, whoa, that's really neat. And so we hope this idea is not just about the universe, but just reimagining how things in the cosmos, in life, how did the heavens and the earth go together? Right.
Well, yeah, and your subtitle is How the Heavens Declare the Glory of God, and I think it's just a great title. There's a whole chapter that Michael Ward did on C.S. Lewis, where he talked about the reason why we call the stars the heavens versus space, and the importance of recognizing the difference between just empty space or the heavens. And so we'll get into some of that, but that kind of leads me to one of the questions I had for you, which you talked about in your introduction. You quoted C.S. Lewis, who says, by reducing nature to her mathematical elements, modern naturalistic models of the universe substituted a mechanical for a genial or animistic conception of the universe. The world was emptied first of her indwelling spirits, then of her occult sympathies and antipathies, finally of her colors, smells, and taste. I thought that was a really neat quote. How has the stars, we go out, we look at the stars, we feel some sort of, spiritual connection to to the heavens. So what would you say to the materialists who might dismiss the book for its supernatural themes?
Well, I think the first thing is that, C.S. Lewis didn't believe that there were spirits inside trees or stars or anything like that. He was simply going from a time in mythological and religious understanding of the ancient worlds that did believe the universe was alive and filled with spirits. And he's not advocating that we go back to a pagan time where we believed that gods inhabited things, but rather that instead of throwing out, science has changed our perception of the universe. But instead of throwing out the idea of God, what modern science has done for the last 500 years is gradually, piece by piece, thought that it could explain the universe without God. And so the emptying that Lewis takes to task here is the emptying of this the idea that the universe was divinely created. Ours may be the unique generation in which we talk about causality and the universe without reference to any divine being. But when you talk to atheists or skeptics, God is still very much in the forefront of this argument. Books are still being written with God in the title by atheists and skeptics. And any cosmologist who gets into the origins issue of the universe inevitably has to at least give God a mention, an honorable mention of some kind. So that's kind of what Lewis was getting at. Just because we had the medievals and the ancients got their science wrong or didn't know what a planet was from a star, didn't have that kind of requisite knowledge, doesn't mean that the theology is necessarily wrong to the extent of God being the ultimate creator of the universe. So on the screen right here, I have a picture of something that was up above here in the northern hemisphere. You could see this. This was in June. If you were in dark skies, you could see the Milky Way. And this is a constellation called the Summer Triangle. And it consists of the star Deneb, Vega, and Altair. But, anybody, if you go out under a dark skies, this is what you see without light pollution. And this sight is absolutely lost to a majority of people who live in cities. But when you get out from underneath the city lights and you see these things, it is a wonderment. It sparks awe and wonder, and we want to know what these things are. Why is this there? Why such beauty? Why such wonder? Why such arrangement? And so here's the constellation of Cygnus, or the Northern Cross, and it lays right across the Milky Way itself. It's either considered a swan or a cross. And then you have right at the tail end, or the head, or the foot of the cross, is the star Albireo. Now, Albireo, you can find it. This is how I do stargazing. If you're in a dark sky, you can sort of make shapes and triangles to find these things. But Albireo, you can't see with the naked eye. With a telescope or a set of binoculars, this is what Albireo is. It's a double star. It's a beautiful double star of a yellow and a blue star that you can see there. And with the naked eye, you can't tell that it's a binary star. But one of our contributors, David Bradstreet, writes a chapter called "The Glorious Dance of Binary Stars." He says about 60% of the stars in the universe are binary stars. And we learn a lot about the nature of stars from studying these double binary star systems. But notice the language of the chapter. Our book is filled with a sub-theme of dancing, glory and dance. The universe is brought to life when we use metaphors and descriptive language that fit the awe and wonder that we see in the universe. It's not just gas and dust and plasma. There's beauty here that cannot be explained by pure science. And so the only kind of fitting language is to describe it as a dance or a ballroom or a glorious display of some kind. The eye, the heart, the mind, and the imagination look at all of this beauty and wonder. And it's not reducible to pure mathematical forms. Math doesn't explain the awe and wonder. And so, there's not a person who hasn't seen a dark sky who isn't struck by the beauty of it. And so what modern science, what modern mathematical concepts of the universe can explain is the beauty and the arrangement. This is what cosmos means. It means arrangement. It's the same Greek word from which we get cosmetology and cosmology and cosmetics, an arrangement of things. And so, in John 1, the cosmos was created by the Logos. It was arranged by God for his glory. So a dance, a glorious dance, is a fitting metaphor for what we see in the sky. And, it goes well beyond just the materiality of what we see there. So Dr. Bradstreet writes a great chapter that integrates good science, imagination, and his love of the stars and what he studies, and his love of Christ. It's beautiful. It's absolutely, it's one of the great chapters. It's very technical, but it's also very digestible. And I think it gives you that satisfaction that you kind of know the science, but you also know that here's why Dr. Bradstreet thinks it's beautiful. It's because it was created by God.
Absolutely.
So, and actually he talks about this in another book that he has called Starstruck, where that image there I have on the screen of Luke in Star Wars with the double star image there is actually true. There are actually binary stars with planets going around them. Wow. So that's the beauty and wonder is something that modern science can't finally attest to.
Wow. Yeah, that chapter was profound, and I, reading that one, it's a little bit of a technical chapter, but not so much so that you couldn't understand. It was a really, really good chapter, and I learned a lot of things in there I did not know before about binary stars, and it also shows just the uniqueness of our own Milky Way.
Right.
And where
It's
we're
absolutely.
at. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. Melissa Cain Travis, she had an excellent, just speaking of some of the different essays that people can find, I really liked her essay too. She talked a lot about Johannes Kepler. Honestly, going into this book, I hadn't, read a ton on Kepler or Tycho Brahe, and you guys really took those two on pretty well in this work. And she talked about his tripartite harmony. So she described that as the archetypal plan in the mind of the maker, the material manifestation of the plan, and man's intellect. And I thought the way she just addressed that whole essay was a uniquely Christian understanding of the world, or explanation of the world. So I guess my question is, why is it rational to think that we are God's image bearers? And how does just that brute fact in itself actually prompt scientific discovery or further scientific discovery?
Well, the Christian concept of God is Trinitarian in nature. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, in constant communion and fellowship with one another. Three persons, one being, as the confessions say, but not persons in the sense that, as we understand it, it's just a conceptual term to try to wrap our minds around Trinitarian theology. All examples of the Trinitarian theology fall short, but when you look at nature, according to Romans 1 and Colossians 1, that God has fashioned the world and filled it with his invisible attributes. And so a lot of times in creation, what Melissa picks up on, I believe, is this three-part harmony of the God, his plan, and our intelligence within that. It's a Trinitarian relationship where part of the design was that being image bearers of our Creator, we have a rational mind able to conceptualize and subcreate, as J.R.R. Tolkien talked about. We can't create out of nothing, but we can create. We can understand. Our ontology has a source. Our being has a source in the I am, the Yahweh, which is a Hebrew word, to be verb, basically, a being. From our being, our beings are derived from the God who is, the I am. As Paul says to the Athenians in Acts chapter 17, in him we live and move and have our ontology, have our being. So we are going to reflect our Creator in a multitude of ways. And one of those ways is fellowship with one another. One of those ways is fellowship with our Creator. And another way is fellowship, if you will, with creation, our ability to recognize the teleological aspects of and the purposes for which God has created things. And so that's, we're not surprised to find this, that God made the universe, made creation intelligible. You don't have modern science without the concept of cause and effect. There's no science without the assumption that something caused all of this. There's no explanation to be found if you don't think there is a cause to be found. and modern science bears this out. They are essentially always looking for why does the star behave this way? Why does a galaxy behave this way? Why does a universe behave this way? They are constantly looking for explanations. Why? Because the universe has continually revealed itself to be intelligible, rational, logical, ordered. So Melissa's right on that if God has created all of this, which we believe he has, then he has made his creation to be discovered. He has made his creation to be explored. He has made his creation to be intelligible. He has made his creation to be legible. And so he would make creatures that could also, obviously tune in to what he intends us to find. And this is exactly what the Psalm says in Psalm 19, which is the dominant center of our book. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament or the skies show his handiwork. Day to day pours forth speech, and night unto night reveals knowledge. Now, of course, that's not an audible speech or knowledge, but it is something that has gone out throughout the whole world. Psalm 19 goes on to say that the line of the heavens, has gone out throughout the whole earth. There's nobody that has not, in some way, shape, or form, encountered the heavens. And Paul actually quotes Psalm 19 in Romans 10:18 when he's talking about the gospel. Have they not all heard? They have. And then he quotes Psalm 19. And this goes along with Romans 1 as well, that all of us have seen God's invisible attributes in creation, because that's the way God designed it. From our Creator, we get our being, we get our intelligence, we get our ability to read the legibility of what he has created. So in classical Christian tradition, there are two books. There is the book of creation and the book of Scripture.
Right. Well, one of the things that just leapt out to me was, we talk a lot about a finely tuned universe, or just the ability to exist and to live, but we don't really think about the fact that the universe is also discoverable. Like, we look up at the heavens and we can discover, or we are in a place where we can observe the universe. That's powerful in itself, just the idea that we can look up and see the stars and then begin to observe it. And that's something that really stood out to me just reading through the book. I haven't really stopped to think about that. I've always thought about, well, we're finely tuned for life, we're finely tuned to exist, but we're also in a place to explore life, and that's just neat in and of itself. And so that really leapt out to me.
The picture I've got up here along what you just said is that we exist in a part of our galaxy that's not inside a crowded dust lane. It doesn't have too many stars. That we have the place where our solar system, our planet, is placed. We have incredible vistas to the rest of the universe. We can see stuff it's like being up on top of a cliff and looking out over, the Grand Canyon or something. We have incredible vistas of the universe. This image up on the screen is the Hubble Ultra Deep Field that was taken by Dr. Kokomo, worked on the team that imaged this. And this is a spot of sky about as big as the head of a pin. If you held out the head of a pin at arm's length, this is what would be in that spot of sky toward the southern hemisphere, the southern horizon. It's 10,000 galaxies, all in the spot of sky, no bigger than the head of a pin. 10,000 galaxies, not stars. Every one of those, with the exception of a couple of foreground stars, are galaxies of different shapes and sizes, way, way out in the deepest reaches of space. It's the deepest image of the universe ever taken. And it brings to mind, to me, a poem from J.R.R. Manley Hopkins, where he says that Christ plays in 10,000 places, lovely in limbs and lovely in eyes, not his, to the Father through the feature of men's faces. And so Christ not only indwells us, everybody is created in the image of God, and we are like our Creator in many different ways, but so is the creation. Christ plays in 10,000 places in creation as well. And so the only kind of expression, the appropriate expression for seeing something like this is poetry and music and song and worship and awe and wonder. And the creation and Scripture evokes these things within us. So we are in a spot of the universe, not just to live and breathe and survive, but to discover, to flourish, to wonder, to contemplate.
Right. And you talk, this isn't something we plan on talking about, but just looking at that image, you talk about in your introduction the Hubble Ultra Deep Field, and just the story of how they got those images I thought was really, really unique, really, really cool to read. I didn't understand or know that before, that there was this point of space that was just black, or where they were using the camera at the time, they couldn't see that far, and it would cost them a lot more money to zoom in, if you will. I'm just using my unscientific language here, but to look a little further, and then they see 10,000 or at first 3,000 galaxies. And when you look at those pictures, man, it's just kind of breathtaking to see. Those are not stars. Those are not just planets. Those are galaxies, as you said, and that's powerful. I just really enjoyed reading through that. So
yeah, it's stunning. And those pictures I have in my intro chapter are historic pictures. When they were taken, they were the first of their kind. Nobody was. I think some people anticipated something like that, but nobody really was prepared to see what was revealed by the telescope when those images were taken. So
right.
it is a wonderful thing.
Right. Well, Guillermo Gonzalez, I think I'm pronouncing that correct. He wrote The Eschatology of Habitable Zones, and so he talked some about that, about being in a place where we can discover, or we can, and also he talked about habitable zones. You hear that, and you start thinking, well, is there places that are Earth-like? And I think he makes some good points in there that habitable zones does not necessarily mean that there's a bunch of other Earths out there, or even that there is any life out there that we've discovered just yet. But it is a neat conversation to have. So it's kind of funny. I get this question from college students, and I think it's just kind of an odd question. But what should Christians think about? There's 10,000 galaxies out there. So is there life out there? What does that mean for a Christian when we look up and see all of these galaxies?
Well, that snapshot was just 10,000 in a small spot of sky. Who knows how many?
Right.
You multiply it. I've heard nobody's exactly sure. 200 billion, 300 billion, 400 billion galaxies. Nobody really knows. But the estimates are in the hundreds of billions.
Right.
And so the assumption is, and I think the assumption of extraterrestrial life comes from a couple of places. Number one, if you have and I mean this in the most broad and general sense. I'm not laying it out in terms of a very specific neo-Darwinian concept, but a very broad and general, long, slow process of evolution, of evolving. So if you believe that life has undergone a long, slow process of gradual evolution over time, and if you believe that the universe has gone on through a long, slow, gradual progression over time, in other words, life and the cosmos have both come out of a very lengthy process of billions or billions of years. If you take those for granted, if you just assume those things, then the logical conclusion would be, well, if life was one long slog right here on this little rock, given all the rocks that are out there, maybe life has slogged through a gradual several billion year development as well, because look at all those galaxies out there. Certainly, if we evolved unintentionally, then there is certainly the remote possibility that life has evolved elsewhere. That's one way you can look at it. Another way you can look at it, and this is where some theologians have gone into the realm of speculating, is that God has intentionally created us and the universe and Earth to be habitable. Does that mean that God intentionally created life elsewhere on other planets? And that's just not an answer to the question that we have. We just don't know. And that's Guillermo's point that it may be, would they be like us? Would they be fallen in need of Jesus? Probably not, simply because Scripture is very clear that Jesus died once and for all. He wasn't dying all over the universe. Calvary, Jerusalem, Israel, Moses, Sinai, Egypt, these would be inconsequential places to people in other worlds. It just wouldn't make any sense to anyone. So, maybe for me personally, maybe there's some kind of microbial life, maybe some kind of biological life. But then one thing that Guillermo is very careful to point out, and this gets back to what you had said earlier about Earth-like. Okay, so let's talk about that really quickly. When you see that written by an astronomer in a popular magazine, Scientific American or something, or Forbes or New York Times, and you see Earth-like planets discovered, what that term basically means is that they have found a planet that is roughly the mass and the circumference of Earth and roughly the same distance from its parent star. And that is what people call the habitable zone. And so Earth-like only really boils down to two things when you see it in popular science. A rock, a sphere, a planet about our size, about our mass, about the same distance from its host star as we are from our sun. But he doesn't say this. This is what I say. But calling a planet Earth-like really is almost kind of deceptive in the sense that there's only two factors that go into that. So it's kind of like calling a grapefruit basketball-like. Now, it kind of is. Maybe has similar mass, plus or minus, and you could put it through a hoop, and it's about the same color. But other than that, it's not really basketball-like. You can't bounce it. It's not going to last very long, and you can't eat a basketball. Of course, there's so many differences. Earth-like to me would be like planets with Starbucks and people and cars and traffic in Los Angeles and Disneyland on it. There's nothing like that in the universe right now. I mean, absolutely, to our knowledge, we are it, and that's troubling to people because the specialness suggests that we were intended to be here. It bespeaks of God intentionally creating this island utopia for us in the midst of all of this other stuff that would be deadly to us if we left our zone. So there's a lot that goes into this. And again, it gets into the imaginative aspects of things that we've talked about previously. A lot of science fiction imagines what life on other planets would be. C.S. Lewis has a whole trilogy, the Ransom trilogy, that explores the question of aliens and other lives from a Christian perspective. He was kind of writing in opposition to H.G. Wells's science fiction. And a lot of people believe and speculate that theologically speaking, that if we were to encounter aliens of any kind of intelligence, that would overturn traditional religious understanding of our place in the cosmos. Maybe, but I don't think so. I really honestly do not think that alien life is any kind of threat to Christian orthodoxy whatsoever. It just means, it's just like when we discover something here on Earth. In 2016, there was several thousand new species discovered for the first time. A couple of them were like the sorting hat spider that was discovered in India, or the Drogon ant. I don't know where that was discovered, but these were species that hadn't been known to us since until 2016. So what would happen if we found an alien? Scientists would be the spokespersons, and they would immediately try to classify what it is and discern what it is and tell us all what this alien life means and what it means for us and everything else like that. So if we discovered something on another planet, it's just like when we discover something here. We'd look at it, sort it, classify it, define it, and try to explain where it came from. That's right. That's what we do. And secular science would do that without reference to God. And Christians who were really thinking through their faith wouldn't be disturbed by that kind of discovery at all.
Wow, that's good stuff there. I was reading through my favorite chapter in the book, which, I like them all. They're all good. But my favorite essay, honestly, was Sarah Salviander's. I thought that was just so just inspiring and almost terrifying too in some regards.
Yes.
So the opening of the chapters, it's just beautiful, scary, all at one time. She says, the end of the universe is not a time but a place. With this knowledge, some people imagine that if the universe were finite and had a boundary, it must be unimaginably and comfortably far away. The truth is that the end of the universe is only 26,000 light years from Earth. It exists in our Milky Way galaxy and lies in the direction of the constellation Sagittarius. But if you look there, you won't see the end of the universe. It's invisible. And what she's describing is a black hole. And I'm not sure if it was last year or just a few months ago that NASA released the black hole, or sort of an image that was almost the first image caught. You can correct me if I'm wrong here. The first image of a black hole that they had shared with the public. And I'm not sure if I'm exactly right on that, but I do remember them releasing this image and just being amazed by the fact that we're talking about black holes when just not long ago we didn't think they existed. So can you tell us, because I have people ask me around that time, well, what is a black hole? We hear that and we think of it and we try to imagine it, but can you just, in the most simplistic form, describe to us what a black hole is, and maybe even how that points to God, or what's the relation between what could we do? It's such a terrifying, massive, force. So how does that relate to God, and maybe even point specifically to Jesus? So what is a black hole, and how does that relate to God, or how does Sarah tie that into God? I want to take the time to give a shout out to Anchor Podcasts. If you are out there and you are looking to start a podcast and you have no clue how to do it, Anchor is the way to go. You can record your podcast, upload it, and then from there they'll take it and share your podcast with the majority of podcast platforms. They'll also look for sponsorships for you as you get downloads. They take care of the hard stuff. So if you're looking to start a podcast, if you're looking to start something that you don't know how to share it with the rest of the world, Anchor can do the work for you. So you just upload your audio, they share it, they make it happen, they make it easy for you. So special shout out to our sponsor, Anchor Podcast.
Excellent questions, and I had to brush up. I mean, this book helped me to dabble a little bit in a lot of different subjects. I love the cosmos, and I love to learn everything I can about it. So this book was as much a learning experience for me as it was anything else. But I'm good Twitter friends on social media with Sarah, and so I asked her about this, and I told her when we wrote the book, I said her chapter is going to be very popular. So I shared her comments with you, and she's very excited about it. She's like, "This is so neat that a chapter like this is taking off with people." So on my screen here, I have a picture of Andromeda, which is our nearest galaxy neighbor. It is 110 light years, 110,000 light years across. And a light year, keep in mind, is 6 trillion miles, plus or minus. And at the center of what we now believe, at the center of most every galaxy, is a black hole. So for illustrative purposes, our Milky Way is about the same size as Andromeda, give or take a couple thousand light years. Our Milky Way, this is a spiral galaxy. Andromeda is a classic spiral galaxy. Our galaxy is a barred spiral, we believe, but despite whatever shape a galaxy may take, most galaxies contain at the heart a black hole. This is a galaxy M51, the Whirlpool galaxy, which is located just underneath the handle of the Big Dipper. It has a little dwarf galaxy as a neighbor there, but M51 is a classic spiral galaxy, and at the center of that galaxy is also believed to be a black hole. Now, take note of the shape. The shape, we'll just use a classic spiral example for it as an example. We've all stirred coffee, or we've all watched water go down the drain of a sink or a bathtub. And when you stir coffee or you unplug a drain, what do you see the water do? It spins in a cyclic manner all the way down into the hole. Why does the water go down into the hole? What's drawing the water down into the hole? Gravity. When you stir the coffee with the spoon, what is the swirling liquid going around? The momentum of the spoon. The faster you swirl, you can actually get a hole in the middle of your coffee if you stir it really fast. And if you've ever turned on a blender and you look down the center of a blender, what do you see? You see a hole, right? You ever take the top off a blender when you're making a smoothie? You got it on fast speed. You look down in the blender and you see a hole, right? What's causing the hole? That centrifugal force, the spin of the blade. When you empty the sink, what's causing the water to spin? What's pulling the water downward? Gravity, right? We don't even really know what gravity is, but we kind of do, but we kind of do. Gravity is just an explanation for something that we can't explain, really. We don't really know what it is. It's kind of an enigma. So what's happening here is basically, in a nutshell, layperson's term, and I don't mean to be crude about it, but black holes are cosmic drains. They are centers of blenders. They are your coffee spoon. And what's making all of this light and gas and dust swirl is a very, very dense center of gravity. And it's inconceivable because back in the 60s, people could not imagine. So imagine the blackness of space, of the heavens, the black stuff, as a fabric, as a bed sheet, as some kind of stretchy, like spandex, if you want to go there. The space is kind of like stretchy black spandex. Now, what if you put a bowling ball on a piece of spandex? What would happen? What would the bowling ball do to the spandex? It would warp the spandex, right?
Right.
because of its mass. All right. So black holes are like bowling balls on spandex, and they're warping the mass of the fabric. Now, here comes the inconceivable part. The black holes are so heavy that they stretch the space fabric infinitely. At least with a drain, there's an end. At least with a blender, there's a bottom. At least with a cup of coffee, there's a bottom to the coffee cup. What astronomers could not believe was that this hole created, this black hole, this very, very, very densely packed, invisible, massive thing, was basically an infinite hole from which not even light could escape. So the more massive an object, the harder it is to get off of it. That's why you need all kinds of power to escape Earth's gravity, because we're so huge. We're trying to escape the mass of Earth. And the bigger something is, the harder it is to get away from it. If we were the size of Jupiter, we would be having a very difficult time just walking because of the mass of the planet. So what we have in a black hole is just the most incredible, inconceivable, unimaginable amount of mass that is so dense that it has created a, quote, hole, for lack of a better word, in the space-time spandex. And stuff just swirls down into it. And once you get to a point where not even light, a photon, which has no mass, photons can't even escape the dense mass of a black hole. And so really their benefit to the cosmos is that they clean up stuff. So they create beauty. I mean, imagine, the water swirling in your drain. Thankfully, water does get drained, right? Your bathtub water, your sink water, your toilets, everything flushes and drains, right? And what are we doing when we're draining water? We're taking away stuff, right? And so the black holes are kind of like, people, they get a bad rap. People say they're destructive. They eat things, they destroy things. And no, not any more than drains in the house are helpful to us for domestic life. Drains in the cosmos keep the cosmos clear of the kind of detritus that would fill up. If stuff exploded, if stars constantly exploded, and if there was all this explosion, where is it going to go if it doesn't have a drain? And so the black holes kind of serve as the cleanup agents, if you will, of our solar system. And what you're seeing in a galaxy really is the universe, God designing the universe to clean up after itself. Of course, he's designed these things for beauty, but there is a functional utility to the beauty as well, that they actually maintain the level of matter and energy in our universe. And black holes are all over the universe. And without them, we would just be filled up with luminous junk. And we couldn't see anything, and it would be an uninhabitable universe. So it keeps, I believe they keep a nice balance for the amount of matter and energy that we have in the universe. So that's black hole in a nutshell from my own lay perspective.
Well, that's neat, man. That helps me to understand it a little more. And I think for those who are listening, probably to understand it a little more. I don't know if we can ever wrap our minds completely around something that complex and massive, and but it's helpful to use those images of the stirring the coffee or the drain at home. It helps you to kind of understand that a little better. So I want to go back to, just so we cover a few of the different topics in the book, I want to go back to something your friend Wayne Spencer did, an essay on Johannes Kepler and Tycho Brahe, and I think he did just such a great job. It's almost humorous to read through their relationship. They were completely in many ways opposites, and so I just loved that essay. So if you could, I just thought that was a really neat essay. Could you share with us just what makes these scientists or their relationship between each other unique? Tell us a little bit about the two of them and how their relationship was unique as sort of, two opposite forces, but, that worked together, really helped each other out. Iron and sharpen iron, if you will.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I agree with you that Wayne does a great job of bringing these characters back to life from the past, and showing how important their faith was in what they did. So, excuse me. So let's start with these images I have up on the screen. What you're seeing here are two images from Hubble and Chandra X-ray. These are composite images from space telescopes that show invisible color. of two supernovae. Now, supernova are exploded stars. Okay, so on the left is what we call SN 1572. It's colloquially known as Tycho's, or Tycho. I think it's Tycho's nova. And he saw this nova just near Polaris, near the North Star, near the constellation of Cassiopeia, the W that goes around the Northern Star. And it was a nova just means a new star, new. And he was the first to see this, credited to be the first one to observe this nova. And he saw it in 1572. And so let me back up a little bit. So you can see that's what's left over from the exploded star, but it was visible almost as bright as the moon when it first came out. And what's interesting is that before this nova, before 1572, the medieval concept of the universe was that above the realm of the moon, the heavens were perfect and immutable. They didn't change. They were functionally beautiful from time immemorial. God set them up. They were perfect. Nothing in that realm above the moon ever changed. So the critical question was, when Tycho saw this, was this nova underneath or between the Earth and moon, or was it outside of and above the realm of the moon? Now you can imagine the kind of frenzy in the astronomy world to even consider the possibility that this star appeared above the realm of the moon. What would that mean for cosmology and astronomy of that day? It would mean that their concept of the heavens being perfect above the moon was wrong. And so this was an earthquake, if you will, of observations, a very historical one. And of course, Tycho did his measurements, and Tycho was a great observer before the era of the telescope. He lived just before Galileo's time, and actually in his observations didn't own a telescope, but he owned a lot of other instruments. So anyway, he discovered that this was outside or above the realm of the moon, and stirred up all kinds of controversy in terms of what that meant for astronomy of the time. And so after Tycho, Kepler saw a supernova, and Kepler saw his nova in 1604. Now, what's interesting about these is these are the last two supernovae that we have observed in our Milky Way galaxy. So that's pretty cool. We have not seen a supernova inside the Milky Way since 1604. So over 400 years, we've not seen a supernova. We've seen lots of supernovae out in the galaxies and other galaxies, but not in our own. They're very rare in our own galaxy. So let's go back here for a second and talk about how these two got together briefly. Tycho, for his observation of the nova in 1572, was given an entire island by King Frederick II of Denmark. Not in addition to the island, Frederick gave Tycho a lot of money. And so Tycho built Uraniborg, which is pictured there. It's like a 17th century Hogwarts, 16th century Hogwarts. It was the craziest place. A lot of crazy stuff going on. Tycho was kind of a bombastic, flamboyant, argumentative, secretive, a huge personality. But you got to keep in mind what's really interesting about Tycho is that he lived during the time of the Counter-Reformation. So there was a lot of political and religious and ecclesiastical upheaval in Europe at the time. Areas where it was Catholic or areas where it was Protestant, and the Protestants didn't get along with the Catholics and the Catholics didn't get along with the Protestants, and there was a lot of that going on as Tycho and Kepler were making their calculations and observations. So Uraniborg became this huge thing on the island of Ven, which is H-V-E-N. I'm not sure how to pronounce that in Dutch, but it was his own island given to him by Frederick. Tycho lost his nose in a duel when he was younger, most of his nose. And so for a lot of his adult life, he had several sets of prosthetic noses. Then he always kept some glue or paste around so his nose would, stay on. It's kind of funny. But at Uraniborg, he had all kinds of animals. He had rooms for alchemy. He had rooms for observation. He had pets. He had people. He had servants. He had this secret bell rope, where he had servants where he could pull the bell rope and make servants come into the room, and nobody knew about it. People thought he was doing magic. King James, who became the King James of Scotland, who went on to become King James I of England, came to visit Uraniborg. Now, why did Frederick give him all this money? Well, because at the time, a lot of kings and princes and people and nobles wanted to know their future. Why did kings and princes and people want to know their future? Well, because of the Protestant and Reformation and the Counter-Reformation, and kingdoms were being overturned and people were losing their heads and people were losing their political power. And so a lot of people look to the astronomers to discern what's going on in the sky. Did stuff in the sky predict what would happen to kings or princes? And so a lot of kings and people and political leaders were concerned about having good astronomers read the skies for them. Of course, there's nothing to astrology, but it was a profitable business for Kepler and for Tycho to be able to prognosticate about a king's future by making observations of the heavens. But really, Kepler and Tycho really didn't believe in that stuff, but it was profitable to write, astrological predictions for kings and things. And so that's one reason why Frederick had bestowed upon him all this. But so here's the thing with Tycho and Kepler. Tycho was the observer. He had all kinds of tools and things, and there's a picture there on the right, which is a quadrant. This is a huge thing which measures the angle of stars and planets off of the horizon. And so Tycho was an astute observer. And of course, this was before the time of the telescope. He made acute observations, and he kept his observations very detailed but very secret. And he needed assistance. And one of the assistants that eventually came on to Venn and worked with him later in other places was Kepler. So Kepler had bad eyesight. Kepler's childhood growing up was like the story of Job. The guy went through all kinds of trials and tribulations, lost wives and children, moved from city to city, blah, blah, blah. He just went through a whole lot, but maintained his faith in Christ. He was a Lutheran. But it wasn't until after Tycho died that Kepler finally got all of Tycho's mathematical observations. And if it wasn't for Tycho's observations, Kepler would not have come up with his 3 laws of planetary motion, which we now have today. So from all that mess at Uraniborg, even Tycho even had a pet moose in the house that became fond of Danish beer. And the story goes that one night it was drunk and it crawled upstairs and fell down the stairs in a drunken stupor, and that's how the moose died. But he had all kinds of weird stuff going on. So it's amazing that anything came out of Uraniborg. But truly, without Uraniborg and without his observations, you don't have Kepler crunching the numbers and doing the math. Tycho was not a mathematician. Kepler was. Kepler couldn't look at anything because of his bad eyesight, but he could do math really, really well. And he struggled for years and years on the planet Mars, trying to figure out the planet Mars. And there was all kinds of ad hoc theories about how the planets moved. It's a whole other story about how to get into that. But he finally deduced that planets did not travel in a perfect circle, but what we now know to be ellipses around the sun, something of an egg shape. But we don't have Kepler's planetary laws without Uraniborg, without Tycho, without the data and stuff that he observed. And but both men persevered through all of it because of their faith. Wayne does a great job of showing how important that was for both men. And these are just some pictures of that's a sextant on the left, and that's a sort of I forgot the name of it, armillary sphere, where it just shows the positions of the Earth in the center and the various ecliptics and the lines, the path of the sun and the moon and the celestial sphere. These are basic tools that they had back then that you would have seen at Uraniborg.
Right.
So
yeah, I found that place so fascinating. I just had never heard that.
Hogwarts meets Disneyland meets NASA or something.
Yeah, that was really cool. I loved his essay, and just a unique way to tell their story. And Uraniborg, man, that was the one thing that just leapt out to me. And just he called it his Disneyland-like observatory in the essay, and I thought that was cool.
Yeah, it really was.
I really enjoyed reading that. So let's talk about Michael Ward's essay. I really, of course, Michael was a huge part of the project for you and a great connection for you. And Dr. Ward, teaches at HBU. He's incredible. And I just really loved his essay. I liked the history behind the use of the word space. We say that all the time. When we talk about the stars, we talk about space, outer space. And you hear people refer to the Ransom trilogy as the space trilogy, sort of, and I just had never really thought about that word. And so reading Dr. Ward's essay, he says, the first writer on record using space in the modern sense is, again, interestingly, John Milton. So Lewis, of course, knew Milton's poetry intimately. One of his most important academic works was a preface to Paradise Lost. But Milton is the first writer, or perhaps the first writer, to use the noun space in its fully modern sense. So in that quote that Dr. Ward used from Milton, Milton writes, space may produce new worlds, thither, if but to pry, shall be perhaps our first eruption, thither or elsewhere. For this infernal pit shall never hold celestial spirits in bondage. And the speaker of these lines in the poem is Satan. I just thought that was really neat. I'd never really thought about the origin of that word, or the first time someone's used it. I mean, as far as we know, Milton may have been the first to use it in that modern sense when talking about the heavens. So maybe you could expound on that a little bit. The heavens versus, just the terminology there, the heavens versus space. Why is that important?
Well, it is because if you go back to that quote that you had written earlier about Lewis noting the emptying of the universe. In the medieval time, you have Copernicus and you have the changeover that we're talking about here. When you're coming up with mathematical explanations for the cosmos. You are now, in the minds of many, if you could explain, like Newton comes along in late 1600s and comes up with gravity as an explanation for how things move. Kepler was very close to coming up with a theory of gravity, but just never quite got there. What starts to happen is the universe starts to become one giant mechanism, the machine, the clockwork, that when you think about the conception of machines and clockwork, what starts to happen, the metaphor that starts to take over, is the absenteeism of the one who makes the clock. So the implication slowly grew that a mechanized view of the universe leaves nothing for God to do. And so this idea, this slow, gradual, encroaching deism that led into the 18th century, this idea that God set everything up, kind of wound it up like a well-oiled machine or a watch of some kind, and then just let it function on its own. This was the sort of the final emptying, if you will. And this concept was on the mind of Milton, the idea that it's interesting. He puts this, as you say, in the mouth of Satan, who wants to usurp the glory of God. And what better way to do that than to assault the imaginations of man in reacclimating, or not reacclimating, but deceiving him into thinking that God has been removed from his position in the heavens, that the universe no longer is animated and filled with life. It's just dead, cold vacuum, like the inside of a watch, well put together, but who's maintaining it? Well, nothing. It's just the watch. The watchmaker has designed it to function by itself. And so the more that we used mathematics to explain the cosmos, the emptier it became. And until, as I allude to in the opening chapter, mathematics then substituted the idea of God. I mean, mathematics took over as almost a causal agent for the universe. So it was, but of course, numbers are abstract things and can't cause anything. But this idea that you can explain the cosmos in mathematical relationships really began to call into question the idea of God. But if you go back to Thomas Aquinas, of course, the universe still requires a sentient cause to do this. You can't have matter and energy creating itself. But people began to be so enamored with this idea of being able to explain the cosmos mathematically that as Lewis says in the back of Out of the Silent Planet, that idea that a nightmare long engendered in the modern mind by the mythology that follows in the wake of science. So there's this idea in Lewis's mind that the mythology of modern science is that mathematics can explain everything that once used to be applicable to a creator. And that is kind of the idea from where space came. The idea that this cold, and I'm quoting Lewis here, the black cold vacuity, the utter deadness, which was supposed to separate the worlds, this blackness when we look out into there, he thought it was all, quote, barren. But now, this is Ransom, he saw that it was the womb of worlds, whose blazing and innumerable offspring looked down nightly even upon the earth with so many eyes, and here with how many more. No, space was the wrong name. Older thinkers had been wiser when they named it simply the heavens which declared the glory. So this is what's going on in the space trilogy. No, not the space trilogy. That's not what we're supposed to call it. The Ransom trilogy. Out of the Silent Planet was this transformation of Ransom's idea that the universe was space back to this older idea that the universe was heavens. So once our science started to mature, it started to take over in a way that was never intended to be understood. And that's kind of what did the vacuuming, if you will, was the idea of being able to explain the cosmos mathematically. And this is not a slight against mathematics. It's simply that it became such a fanciful thing that people began to substitute it, especially skeptics and atheists and people that were disinclined to want to attribute things to a divine creator. This became a much more favorable way to explain the universe, the use of mathematics. So it's not to say math is bad. It's just that people substituted God with mathematics, and thus the universe became empty. Right.
And Dr. Ordway's essay, which he quotes Tolkien, and as he says that recovery, he talks about recovery, which includes return and renewal of health. It's a regaining of a clear view. He says, I do not say seeing things as they are and involve myself with the philosophers, though I might even venture to say seeing things as we are or were meant to see them, as things apart from ourselves. And I wonder if that maybe it relates to a little bit of what you just said, but trying to recover sort of an imaginative vision when we see the cosmos. There's more there than just a mathematical explanation as to what's going on in the world around us. And Paul Gould did an excellent essay as well, where he talks about some of the reasons we come to different conclusions about the world. So some of us are raw materialists, and then there are others that maybe believe that there are supernatural forces at work in the world. Gould says it has to do with the imaginative stories and philosophical assumptions we bring to our perceptual experience, and he suggests a return to seeing the heavens as God's dazzling theater as compared to a theater of the absurd. And I thought that was really cool. That was a good way to end on, and of course that's the essay before your afterward, but I just, and we'll kind of close with this question here, but what are some of the reasons that we as theists or as atheists can see the exact same heavens? We look up, we see the same sky. We see the same world. We probably see some of the same evidence for God's existence presented to us, but yet we come to polar opposite conclusions when we look at the sky.
Well, I think it's a good example would be from, I think it's the magician's nephew in the Chronicles of Narnia, that this idea that, there's Uncle Diggory and then there's the children. And Lewis talks about being predisposed to see the world in a particular kind of way. And so how you see the universe depends a lot upon the kind of person that you are right now. And so there is, of course, we are fallen and sinful, but Romans 1 says that we all have a knowledge of God, and that we suppress that knowledge in unrighteousness. And we would rather worship created things than the creator. We would rather attribute divine characteristics, if you will, unintentionally or intentionally, to what is created, to the creatures, to matter and energy, rather than to God. That is our bent disposition. We want to empty the universe of God's glory. We don't want to be accountable to a creator. That's our sinful nature. But I think that what you need and what we all need, and how I end the book, is the call of Jesus in the Gospels, beginning in Matthew. John the Baptist echoes this, and Jesus himself says it: repent, for the kingdom of the heavens is at hand. And so Matthew uses the word heaven or heavens some 70 times in his gospel. And it's remarkable. One who is greater than the heavens themselves is here. And it requires a metanoia, a change of mind, a turning from darkness to light, a turning away from sin to Christ. And without the gift of repentance, we are not going to see the universe or Jesus or our fellow man. We are not going to be able to participate in that tripart harmony that Melissa talked about. We are not going to be able to see the beauty and the wonder as coming from God. We are not going to be able to see the beauty and the wonder of Jesus. We are not going to be able to see, articulate, or proclaim the glory of God without repentance. And so it sounds like a dirty word. It sounds like a bad word, but really it is a gift. It is the greatest thing to be able to turn from darkness to the light and to see the creation for the first time, or to see Jesus for who he really is and what he's done for you. And that's kind of how I ended the book. Sin keeps us from seeing things as we need to see them. And even as Christians, this is not just an atheist versus a Christian debate. This is a humanity versus God debate.
Right.
And God is for us. God is for us. And so recognizing our sinful nature causes a great deal of humility and a reliance upon Christ, and a proclamation that, as 1 Peter 3:15 says, that is done in gentleness and meekness. So when we declare the glory of God, we do it with gentleness and meekness and reverence, because we too know our station before God. Without repentance, without faith, without grace, without mercy, we do not see the kingdom of the heavens as we should. And so it's an old-fashioned message that sin keeps us from seeing things as we ought to see them. And so repentance is just that gift of turning to Jesus. And I think the universe is full of examples of what it means to turn, because our very planet does this daily. Our planet is turning from dark to light, daily turning from dark to light. And that's what repentance is. It is it is a man spinning on his axis, constantly turning away from sin to Jesus. And that's what we need to do. And it's just a daily thing, right? It's not just going to church and confessing. It's just, Lord, I fell short here. Lord, I sinned here. Lord, I sin. I repent. It's an old fashioned message, but that's the one. That's why I ended the book that way. That's the call. If you see all this glory, what do I do? Repent and believe. That's really what it boils down to.
Yeah, it's an excellent way to end the book. And my hope and prayer is that, someone that maybe even listening to the podcast, that, they see this glory when they look up at the stars. They see, they feel like there's more to life than just the material world. That maybe that would be their prayer, to stop and, just take a moment and think about our purpose here, and think about what it's really unique that we're here. And that's not even a good enough word for it. The fact that we're here is just, it's amazing. So to stop and recognize that, and not run away from that, but just say, okay, well, I've tried to do it my own way, and, I'm open to understanding the Creator that put me here, and just turning it all over to Him and trusting Him with it. So,
and for
great
us,
way to end it.
Yeah, and I think for us in the field of Christian apologetics, I think it would behoove and benefit us. Myself, I speak to myself here to be more 1 Peter 3:15, not just giving a defense, but giving a defense with gentleness and meekness, so that if the atheist says, well, he might be right, but he's a jerk, they don't. But if you love your enemy, that you should be the first person that they want to ask more meaningful questions to. You want to have such a disposition that you leave the door open for them. And I think that's the gentleness and meekness. We can give a defense pretty well, but like 1 Corinthians 13 says, if I can explain all mysteries, but I don't have love, what have I got? Right, clanging cymbal. So we need to make sure that we're not clanging our cymbals, and we need to be more gentle and reverent. I do. Because a lot of this knowledge, apologetics fills you with a lot of good things, but it also can tempt you into thinking that you're master of the universe to some extent.
Right.
And we're not. We're just not. We just admit our limitations and give a defense as we have been able to be giving defenses to people without overstepping our bounds.
Right. And I think a book like this, when you read it, it's a humbling book. It brings you back down to, wow, it's humbling, and it's very awe-inspiring to just have a place in this world. It's very humbling. So I definitely enjoyed reading through Story of the Cosmos. See, two things, Daniel, before we get you out of here.
Yes.
I read in your afterword, something about this software called Stellarium, and I thought it would be cool if you would just share before you get out of here, for any person who, you call yourself a lay astronomer, for any person who would just want to start, stargazing, that would be interested in, hey, I think I could do that. I could get a telescope. I could, get an app on my phone. I could go out to, the hillside with some friends and look up at the stars. What would you suggest? Someone like myself who would not know where to start with any of that. What would you suggest? And tell me a little bit about Stellarium, and then also, as we close, where can our listeners get the book, and where can they find you?
Okay, well, you can get the book anywhere. Anywhere books are sold. Amazon, Barnes & Noble. We're even in Walmart. We used to be in Target. I don't know if Target's carrying this anymore, but you can get it pretty much anywhere. Right now, as far as I know, Christian book distributors, CBD, has it the cheapest. So you can go anywhere to get a book. I went to 3 Barnes & Nobles yesterday, actually, as a matter of fact, and one of the 3 of them had copies. So, and just for your listeners, if you go to Barnes & Noble, they are in the religion section in the subcategory of comparative religion. I don't know how they ended up there, but that's where they are. You will not find them in the Christian section. You will find them in the religion section in comparative religions and studies. It's like one shelf. I don't know how they figured that out. But anyway, so for the people that really want to get interested in astronomy, because I've had a few people ask me this question. It's a great question. So number one, I'm going to plug my friend Sarah. She runs a website called savingOurStars.org. savingOurStars.org. You can follow her on Twitter, Saving Our Stars, on Twitter, @SavingOurStars. And it's a free, practical, hands-on website for being light pollution aware and for getting started in astronomy. She gives you great tips about telescopes and places you can contact, things you can do. One thing I recommend, in your community, there is probably somewhere in the vicinity an astronomy club. And astronomy clubs, there's a very small annual or biannual fee or something. They're very congenial people. If you're just getting into stargazing, they love to have people like that. And you go to star parties. If you don't want to join an astronomy club, go out and find a local star party somewhere. Somebody somewhere in your area will be having. You may have to drive a little bit, but if you're really deadly serious about getting into this, these are the best things to go to, because at star parties, people are usually sharing their telescopes. So you don't even really need to make the initial investment. The second thing, through Sarah's website, you can go to the International Dark Skies Association website, IDA, I think it is, IDA.org. They have actually international dark sky approved parks. Like we have several in Texas. They're all over the country. And they are non-light pollution state parks or recreational areas that you can go. You don't even need a telescope. And the beauty of it is so wonderful, just to sit under a dark sky. So those are some practical tips. You can get on social media and Facebook and find local groups in your area if you want to get into more about astronomy. And once you're in a club and you talk to people at a star party, find out what kind of telescope you'd like. That's what star parties are great for. You can go to telescope hopping and see the different costs and the different kinds of telescopes that people have. But then for Stellarium, it is a wonderful program. I have it on my laptop. You can get it for your laptop or your cell phone. Basically, it is a free download that you can get at stellarium.org. This is not, I didn't get paid by them to represent them in the book. I use it. You have star names, you have deep sky objects. You plug in your zip code. It shows you the stars over your backyard. It's perfectly crystal clear images. It looks like the universe. It's a wonderful facsimile model of the universe that you can see the positions of stars and planets and galaxies and the Milky Way. And it's just a wonderful free software program that you can use on your phone. You can, turn your phone up to the sky and find star names. I love to learn star names. And I've used it to find planets and used it for deep sky objects. and it's really wonderful, and it's free, and you just kind of play around with that to get a feeling for star names. And you look on the screen and see if you can go out and find the constellation you find on the screen and that kind of thing. So it's really fun to play with. But social media is a great outlet for finding star groups in your area, astronomy clubs and star parties. And as we go into fall here, as the weather cools for a lot of people, the skies, you'll have more and more of these things because the skies will be getting darker earlier. So check out your local area and get on social media to find those things. And then was that all you asked me, or I think that was everything?
That's it.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah, Daniel, thank you so much for talking with us. And if you're listening, make sure you go out and get a copy of this. I've told everyone near me, I think my family, my wife, my parents, they're probably tired of hearing about Story of the Cosmos, but I have just fell in love with the book. It's one of my favorites on my bookshelf. It's just a really great read. It's not complicated. It's real easy, and it's real just visual and just great book. So thank you for talking with us today. We just really enjoyed having you on.
Yeah, thank you. It was a blessing to be a part of it.
Absolutely. Well, Daniel, Justin just shut off the recording, so we're not recording anymore.
Okay.
But yeah, man, I really appreciate it. We really had a good time preparing for this, and if you need anything in the future, if we can help in any way, just please let us know. Just excited about it, man.